What's up, Wade? How are you doing? Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Farewell, My King, the Cold of Me podcast. Today, we're going to be going through a Q&A. As you can see here up on your screen, if you're viewing us live, we have all the ways for you to contact Wade at wadejcarey.com, on Facebook, / Wade J. Carey author. And then if you'd like to email us any of your questions, comments, or concerns, you can throw that to farewellmyking@gmail.com. So, Wade, if you wouldn't mind, you can see the screen, Farewell, My King, the Cold of Me. This is based off Flaming Sword Publications, which is, a group that you will probably give us a little intro in here in a few seconds. But before we get into the questions, why don't you just explain to us how this all started and where we're going to go from here?
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me on, Ray. Here's the situation is, back about 14 years ago, I got a calling and just started writing inspirational books, stories, parables, all based, from a Christian perspective, and wanted to start presenting things to people in a way that was easy to understand the complexities of theology without it, having a lot of man-made religion. And so that's continued through 10 different publications, everything from spiritual warfare stories to teaching parables to a budgeting book, a dog about pet bereavement. Started back into the novels again with my Hidden Harbor last year. So, the whole idea for Farewell, My King, the Cult of Me started back about 4 years ago, and it was kind of an itch. The political tensions in the country have gotten so nasty and people are so divided. And I just, being in my early 60s, I'm trying to figure out why. And so I started taking some notes, and then, throughout the years, would take some notes, and it started to get to the point where, you and I were talking just like, why don't we just start talking about these things because they're of great interest. Now, this isn't a political situation, although tangentially politics are involved. This is more about how does things look when you combine everything you see in the political world and then lay the Christian template on top of it, and let's see what that looks like, because a big picture view of things, usually the 30,000-foot view, that's really how you begin to explain things to people. So again, I've got my notes here. I do old fashioned, where I use an old composition book that costs about $1.50 at the office supply store, and I just start taking notes. And going back to August 24th of 2019, I just started writing some things down. I committed to having a cover, which those who are looking at this can see, and I'm ready to start writing the book. But at this point, having a situation where we could, talk about it and perhaps get some feedback from people. I've laid this concept on people before and don't really get a whole lot of pushback, because it's not a situation where I'm trying to favor one party or one situation or one set of beliefs over another. It's just, here is a rational look at what the Christian faith looks like when you lay it on top of the typical right, left, and center, political template. So that's really, what was the genesis of the situation. And of course, there was a Bible verse that jumped off the page at me. It's Proverbs 4:27. It says, "Do not turn to the right or left. Keep your foot from evil."
Well,
And I just felt like,
you're going to be excited, because part of our question is actually going to take you into that. For everyone that is listening to us on your podcasting platform, I want you to, hear this clearly, that this is, a man that got given a ministry, and he has faithfully done that for many, many years now. This book that we're basing this podcast off is a work in progress. It's something that he will be writing through your communication and your response to what goes on in this podcast. And I believe the podcast is going to be something that we do for a considerable amount of time, because it's just a great platform for us to get everyone involved. So before we get into the first question, I do want to say is that if you're interested in looking at all the books that Wade has actually published, they are all available on Amazon. Amazon, just go to your Amazon app and type in Wade J. Carey. It will come up with a couple of books, or at least one book. I believe Hidden Harbor is the first one that comes up because that's his latest release. But follow him there. You can follow him on Amazon, and follow him. We do give away some books. I do a little bit of his social media marketing. So we do give away some books. A lot of it. So we give away some books. If this Wade J. Carey author, search that in your Facebook tab. A lot of that stuff, he puts out a lot of content on exactly his books. Okay. So we're talking like sometimes you can read a couple of paragraphs of his book. So I just wanted to give the 30,000 foot view of the ministry, your role in it. And then why am I here? I'm here because me and you've been friends since 2014 through a couple of these book launches. And, I'm a believer in getting the gospel out, the truth out, and doing it in a way that people can understand it. So I think there's a lot of stuff in this ministry and in these books that can really help a lot of people, from budgeting to spiritual warfare, all the way down to what we're kind of sitting here right now, which was handed to us by our culture. So without further ado, we have 4 questions, and we want to keep this as brief as possible so we want to give you enough time, but we don't want to take too much of your time so we can still be relevant. So for those of you watching, you're going to see a slide come up. If you're not, we will be posting these on either Facebook or YouTube or both in the future. But as of right now, we're just trying to stay with getting some content on our podcast. So let's get down to it. I believe this is where the rubber hits the road for us. We all know Wade just mentioned this Proverbs 4:27, do not turn to the right nor to the left, turn your foot from evil, which is where we seem to be failing. I mean, either someone's turning their foot full left or full right, and usually that's heading directly towards evil. So the first question, Wade, is what is the basic concept of farewell, my king, which you've kind of given us a little bit of overview of. And then how did the idea for the foundation of this book come into play? I mean, so give us you gave us a 30,000. Let's get down to 5,000 foot view of what God did to your heart to kind of put this together.
Right. Well, going back to the Proverbs 4:27, where it says, "Do not turn to the right or left." It's essentially saying, most commentary, that stay on the path towards God and avoid drifting towards sin, which goes to the right or left. And of course, all the wisdom in the world is with the one who created it. So I just found it interesting. I don't know that that was necessarily a political type of thing, but it does illustrate to us the importance of the things that we're going to talk about as we talk about the concepts and several of these podcasts. We'll dig into further details, but staying on the path towards God and avoid drifting off into humanistic tangents that will take us toward the enemy is really the importance of the foundation for the book and for the concept that's in the Proverbs 4:27. So that's really, as I touched on just a minute ago, that's really the basic idea is not just separating political thought. This isn't about politics, but there is political thought, because you have people who lean more toward the right and more toward the left. And then when you take some of the biblical concepts and combine it, that's really what it's all about. What does it look like? And I noticed, going back for about the last 10 years or so, people have gotten more and more hateful toward one another.
Politics or religion. Politics or their religion.
Well, yeah. But the thing is big picturing that, what does that really look like? And it appears to me that people have slowly over time decided that their political beliefs and the political parties that they vote for have become more important than right and wrong, more important than good and evil. And I actually did that going back to when I was younger. if I voted for a certain party or a certain, group, then I would stick with it even when bad things were happening coming from that group or from that politician. And I would stick with it. And of course, that gets down to pride. I don't want to admit that I was wrong in that. But the thing is that doesn't do any good when you're sticking with what humans say, because that is a needle that is always moving around. And I think it's important, and I'm hoping through, putting out the information in this podcast that we can avoid doing that, because right and wrong trumps political parties.
Oh yes.
And
Well, that's a good point, Wade. And honestly, I think I know me and Wade spend a lot of time on the phone together. So I know me and you have tried to tackle this in numerous different ways. And we've even in a small group before talked about that Jesus wouldn't come back with an American flag tattoo and
exactly right.
AR-15. And so, our concept of who Jesus is sometimes gets skewed. And, so I thank you for stepping into this medium, because honestly, I guess the medium is no longer doesn't exist. The middle doesn't exist anymore. So you always have to be bamming around. It just feels like if I'm left, I'm extreme. If I'm right, I'm extreme. I just can't stay in the middle with Christ and do what the Bible says. But I guess that's the bigger picture. So thank you for that. We're going to go to the next question to keep everybody moving here. So the next question is, based on your biblical study, what do you think a theological filter laid on top of the standard right to left politic filter looks like? Taking your Bible and putting it on top of the left right politic filter, what does that look like?
Yeah, and that really, Ray, that's what the whole process looked like. If you can just picture in your mind a horizontal line with the center, and then you've got the furthest point on the right and the furthest point on the left. That's typically what most of your political models look like. And sometimes people will start on one side of it and move to the other, left to right and right to left throughout their life based on the things that happen in that. But that is such a singular way of looking at things. That's just, strictly, through our intellect and our experiences and whatnot. So I started applying biblical concepts to it. And what I found is several of the chapters in the book are going to end up going into more detail, but I would say that in general, people on the right side of the center would be called conservatives. They generally favor the first commandment from God, which is to have, to love God with all your heart and soul. And people on the left seem to lean towards or favor loving your neighbor as yourself. And there is an enemy of both God and people. And that enemy will do everything that he can to take people who are on the right and push them way out on the far right, and take people on the left and push them out to the far left. But the truth is, God created and ordered the universe with a natural balance between loving God and loving your neighbor. Loving God is more towards obedience and observing the law, and on loving your neighbor as yourself is about compassion. And what I started seeing happening in the political process is people started just observing one, and I think that's wrong. I think you're in grave error biblically if you are not observing both of those things. And so keeping a balance is the tricky part. And over a period of time, you can, when you're looking at spiritual warfare and you're dealing with Satan and his army of evil spirits that try to do everything to move people into evil and away from God, doing it over a period of time very slowly seems to be the most effective way. So again, just looking at the right left, and then taking the first two commandments, when you break down the 10 commandments into the first 4 about loving God and the second 6 are about loving your neighbor, and then Jesus just